Dr. Mike here for RP Strength.
Think about violence all the time. Well, if your testosterone is 25 times what it's supposed to be, what the hell do you think it's going to make you think? And both on a raw IQ scale smarter than almost every coach, maybe every coach.
Other JD students at Melbourne Law School use their database access to read case law. I used mine to download Mike Israetel's PhD thesis, which I read in its entirety.
If you ever wanted to watch a man's entire image crumble right in front of the world, this is exactly that kind of story. This dude wasn't just bragging. He swore he had an IQ over 160, carried himself like a flawless genius, and flexed his PhD like it was a championship belt. He built a whole empire teaching people the science of fitness, until the science came back around and tapped him on the shoulder, hard. For almost 10 straight years, Dr. Mike Isra walked around like he couldn't be touched. He crowned himself the godfather of evidence-based lifting, the guy with credentials nobody else could even stand next to. His YouTube videos pulled millions. His voice became the soundtrack of smart bodybuilding, and his company Renaissance Periodization kept selling those PhD-approved results like it was the holy formula. His followers treated every lecture like scripture, hanging on to phrases like fatigue management and minimum effective volume, as if he invented the science of muscles itself. He sold the whole world on being the future of fitness, until someone finally cracked open the research that gave him all that status. And that's when things got wild. In September 2025, a YouTuber named Solomon Nelson did something nobody, not a reporter, not a coach, not even the academic people around Mike, ever bothered to do. He opened up Dr. Mike's actual doctoral thesis. What he found inside didn't look like science at all. It looked like something nobody could explain with a straight face. Entire tables were filled with numbers that didn't connect to reality. One section claimed Division I athletes averaged 73 kilos with a standard deviation of 71. Numbers so off that they suggested some players weighed less than a newborn baby. Whole chapters looked like they had been straight copy-pasted, typos and all, like the document had been frozen in concrete. And every few lines, words were smashed together as if the spacebar had packed its bags and left the keyboard, all coming from a man who built an entire brand around being PhD approved. The moment that thesis went public, the whole thing spread like wildfire, and his image went up in smoke just like that. In barely 72 hours, Dr. Mike went from YouTube's most credible coach to the main punchline on fitness social media. Everyone had a video on him, everyone had jokes, and the same guy who once claimed he was smarter than basically every other coach on earth was suddenly getting clowned by every meme page in the game. His supporters tried damage control, but every move just made it worse. First they said, relax, it's only a draft. Then they doubled down, saying the real version was flawless. Then a so-called final copy popped up on Google Docs. And people noticed it was owned by a digital marketing agency, not Mike himself. Each new spin just made him look more suspicious, and it stopped being only about the thesis.
You mentioned from personal experience being aware of the dark side of anabolic use. What is that?
How long do you have? Anxiety like you would not believe. Every day that I'm on high doses, I wake up in the morning afraid of the rest of my day. Intrusive thoughts. I think about violence all the time. Well, if your testosterone is 25 times what it's supposed to be, what the hell do you think it's going to make you think about? Another one is a marked proximate reduction of IQ. Like right now, as I talk to you, I'm on contest prep. I'm on a considerable dose of anabolics. I'm not as smart right now, and I can feel it. It's this fog. An inability to perceive a broad spectrum of positive human emotion. I live in a really beautiful area in Michigan, and I walk out and there's this pond and these trees, and I know that I like looking at them, but it's a memory to me. I go work out every morning and I look at the pond and the trees and I'm like all I feel is rage and frustration and anger and anxiety.
Thesis falls short of fulfilling one of the most fundamental requirements for doctoral research: a significant contribution of original knowledge. The stated goal of Mike's thesis was to explore interrelationships among fitness variables that he claimed were less clear in the existing literature. However, the core findings, that stronger athletes are more muscular and powerful, that more powerful athletes jump higher and sprint faster, and that leaner athletes perform better in these tasks, are not only unsurprising, but also extensively documented in prior research, even by 2013. You don't have to take it from me. Just listen to Mike himself, who openly concedes this throughout the document. For instance, in 4.7, report that for the 20 lowest performers, the mean body masses were 73.9 kilos and 75.3 kilos respectively, with standard deviations of 71.8 kilos, virtually equal to the means themselves. This is a statistical absurdity. Standard deviation measures the spread of the data around the mean. A standard deviation this large, relative to the mean, is nonsensical in a biological context. For this to be true, given a normal distribution, it would mean that roughly 1/3 of the lowest performing athletes in Table 4.6 had a body mass either greater than 145.7 kilos or less than 2.1 kilos, the weight of a newborn. The sloppiest features of Mike's thesis is the rampant copy-pasting of entire sections across chapters, with identical errors left untouched. The methods section in chapters 4 and 5 are near verbatim clones of those in chapter 3, reproducing the exact same typos, the exact same formatting mistakes, and the exact same structural oversights, of which there are many, which is strong evidence that large portions of the thesis were duplicated wholesale without even a cursory proofread. Spelling errors are everywhere. Mike misspells the word vertical as vetical or vetrical, individual as invididual, properties as propertites, biomechanics as biomechanins, neural as neural, training as traininiger, science as sense, as already noted, and exercise as exercise or exercise. The reference lists themselves are an untamed mess. Across 4 separate bibliographies, Mike fails to italicize journal names, misformats volume and issue numbers.
Months before all this, during his failed run for an IFBB Pro card, Mike had already gone on camera admitting his steroid cycles had him boiling with rage and anxiety, dealing with intense intrusive thoughts that scared even him. At the same time, he kept talking like his willpower was on another level, feuding with Greg Doucette, calling him a two-faced sociopath, and jumping from podcast to podcast bragging about how his intelligence and toughness put him above regular guys. So when Solomon's exposé dropped, he clearly panicked. Overnight, thousands of critical comments started disappearing from his channel. Friends went quiet like they didn't know him, and even Dr. Milo Wolf got pulled into the mess after dropping a defense video that the internet tore apart in record time. That's how the man who called himself the smartest in fitness turned into its biggest joke, not because of some huge crime, but because of the same thing he built his whole brand on: science. Before the YouTube fame, the lectures, and the non-stop science-based claims, there was just a teenage wrestler grinding in a high school gym. Way before anyone slapped the title Dr. Mike on him, he was just Mike, a smaller, curious kid trying to understand a world that didn't make much sense to him. Wrestling practice felt like straight misery. Push-ups every time you lost, side drills for slipping up, extra laps just for breathing too heavy. Coaches treated hard work like punishment, and Mike couldn't wrap his head around it. If training was supposed to make athletes stronger, why was it being used to break them down like that? That simple question got stuck in his mind and refused to leave. While his teammates pushed through another round of burpees, Mike was thinking differently. Almost like a scientist in training. Why did the grown folks running the room think pain built discipline? Why punish effort? One afternoon, after getting hit with more laps for slacking, he had the thought that would shape everything he became. If training makes you better, shouldn't more training be a reward, not a penalty? It was a small spark of rebellion. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, but the kind of moment that quietly shifts a person's entire path. Instead of walking away from the sport, Mike became obsessed with what made it all tick. The leverage, the timing, the strength, the fatigue, the mechanics behind every move. He started digging into whatever info he could get on muscle physiology and conditioning, scribbling notes about force production in the corners of his schoolwork, like it was a secret code only he could see. While other students just wanted to win their matches, Mike wanted to decode them. Every takedown and reversal turned into a little experiment, and that wrestling room became his first real laboratory. It stopped being about being the strongest or the fastest. It became about understanding why certain movements even worked. While friends chased trophies, Mike chased patterns, data, and the rush that came with discovering answers nobody else bothered to look for. All that frustration with questionable coaching, those endless laps meant to break him, ended up pushing him in the complete opposite direction. That early frustration planted a seed in Mike's mind, the belief that there had to be a smarter way to train, a way built on real knowledge instead of old habits and random punishments. That single thought grew into a full-blown obsession, one that would pull him off those sweaty high school mats and push him toward university labs, and eventually the center of a whole fitness empire.
I need to make one thing very clear. The version of Mike's dissertation I've reviewed is a much later draft. This is the document Mike himself saved, defended, and sent to me, and it corrects many of the typos and inconsistencies that Solomon highlighted in his video, through no one's fault in particular, and that appears to be the version Solomon accessed. But one thing is certain. The document Solomon reacted to was not the latest version that was actually examined and passed. And that's the smoking gun. If there's one thing universities never get wrong, it's the name of their own department. In other words, Solomon wasn't even reviewing the defended archived dissertation. To date, Solomon has made more than 10 videos about Mike. That's over 13 hours of content, targeting a single person. Topics range from 2-hour collaborations critiquing Mike's bodybuilding performance, to hour-long reactions to his surgery, to videos like this one attacking his academic record. A quick look at his views on videos where he features Mike versus his non-Mike content shows an enormous discrepancy in his views. When one person becomes your channel's most reliable source of outrage, views, and income, it raises the question of motive. It's a narrative built on spectacle, not on scholarship. I personally wasn't satisfied taking Solomon's word for it. Dr. Mike is a friend of mine, and I know he's a smart guy. But friendship aside, I wanted to see for myself. So I read through the dissertation in full. And then I spoke directly to make one thing very clear. The version of Mike's dissertation I've reviewed is a much later draft. This is the document Mike himself saved, defended, and sent to me, and it corrects many of the typos and inconsistencies that Solomon highlighted in his video. Mike, overall, are you proud of your PhD dissertation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I just want to be really clear about something, and this is very, very important that people tune in. I had many conversations with Stephen Hawking himself when him and I were in the waiting room at Epstein's Island.
By the time he finished high school, his obsession had outgrown sports completely. It wasn't about winning matches anymore. It was about hunting for real answers, the kind you could prove, not just repeat because a coach said so. He enrolled at the University of Michigan to study kinesiology, diving into anatomy labs, biomechanics charts, and the strict language of human physiology. Then, hungry for more depth, he moved on to Appalachian State University for a master's degree in exercise science. This was where he learned how to structure research for real, how to build studies, test ideas, and chase measurable truth. It was the closest he'd ever been to proving the theory that had been buzzing in his head since his wrestling days. That effort, if you truly understood it, could be engineered. He wasn't just an athlete anymore, he was studying the mechanics of effort itself. But a master's degree still wasn't enough for him. The people he admired most all had one thing he didn't: that doctor title. So in 2010, he stepped into a PhD program in sport physiology at East Tennessee State University, a smaller but respected school known for its focus on strength and conditioning research. For the next 3 years, he threw himself into data collection with everything he had, testing around 80 Division I athletes from 4 different sports. He measured anything he could get his hands on: strength, power output, vertical jump, height, sprint speed, and tracked the subtle connections between all those numbers like he was piecing together a secret blueprint. The project didn't just fill his schedule, it became his whole identity. His dissertation, Interrelationships of Fitness Characteristics in Division I Athletes, was his attempt to map out the hidden connections behind elite performance. He wanted to put numbers to the stuff coaches usually guessed about.
I'm going to train exactly this hard. Now, we can talk later about what this hard should be, but let's even say to failure, right? Just to standardize it. I'm going to go to failure on every single, I'm going to push it psychologically like crazy. After you've answered the question of how hard am I going to train, you say to failure, you have to answer the second question of, well, so how many sets am I going to do? Yes, there is a tendency for higher volume programs for you to get tired and not work as hard. So that may cap how much effective volume, non-junk volume you can do. But all the volume you do from the first set to the nth set, if you hold yourself accountable, you can do them with maximum intent to lift, all-out failure. You're still left with the question of how much, which unfortunately, I'm pretty sure I saw the entire video by Greg. He never actually answers the question of how much. He just says, go harder, and he yells a lot, which is funny.
Hey guys, Dr. Israetel here, continuing on in our personal training course with lecture number 4, which is on the nutrition basics. Just the real basics of nutrition so that you can help your clients change their body composition, their strength, their health, etc., not just from a training perspective, but also from a nutritional perspective.
The link between raw strength and speed, between muscle power and true explosiveness. It was bold, complicated, and exactly the kind of challenge he lived for. To Mike, this wasn't just research. It was proof that the idea he carried since those wrestling days could finally live inside real equations and peer-reviewed logic. And when he defended his thesis in 2013, he didn't just walk out with a doctorate, he walked out carrying a symbol. To him, those 3 letters, PhD, meant he'd cracked the riddle that started years earlier on a wrestling mat. After that moment, he wasn't Mike the athlete anymore. He was Dr. Mike, the self-made scientist of strength, loaded with confidence and the belief that he could outthink anyone in the building, maybe any coach he'd ever worked with. With that new title behind him, he stepped into academia acting like this was exactly where he was meant to be. He picked up teaching roles first at Temple University, then at the University of Central Missouri, running lectures on exercise and sports science. Students remembered him as sharp, intense, and extremely proud of those credentials he worked so hard for. Every slide, every diagram, every chart seemed to push one message. He wasn't just teaching fitness, he was transforming the way people understood it. But the world of academia felt too small for him, too slow, too boxed in for the kind of impact he wanted to make. Mike wanted something way bigger than a classroom. He wanted an audience that didn't just listen to his ideas, but practically worshiped them. That chance showed up when he reconnected with an old college friend, Nick Shaw. Together, they built a company that mixed Mike's scientific authority with Nick's sharp business instincts. They named it Renaissance Periodization, or RP Strength for short. The concept sounded simple but hit the industry like a shockwave. Use real scientific principles to craft training and nutrition plans for everyday people in a space flooded with random gym myths and guesswork. RP promised math, data, and precision. Every program came stamped with PhD approved, backed by Mike's academic image like it was a seal of reliability. On paper, it was the perfect mix of credibility and business power. But the real shift came in 2012, when Mike brought his message straight to the internet.
Greg Doucette, who is a two-faced lying sociopath sucker. He talked magic in his videos with his fake voice about how stupid I was and how wrong I was about volume or whatever it was about. And I was like, oh, this guy wants a shot at the title. So when we got face-to-face in a debate, I mirrored that energy. And he turned off his parrot voice and went straight into nice guy agreeable mode. And almost all the comments were like, oh my God, this Mike guy's a asshole. And this Greg guy just came to the back in the day on Omar Isuf's channel with Greg Doucette, who is a two-faced lying sociopath sucker. He talked magic in his videos with his fake voice about how stupid I was and how wrong I was about volume or whatever it was about. And I was like, oh, this guy wants a shot at the title. So when we got face-to-face in a debate, I mirrored that energy. And he turned off his parrot voice and went straight into nice guy agreeable mode. And almost all the comments were like, oh my God, this Mike guy's a asshole. And this Greg guy just came to the conversation to try to learn. No, he didn't. He's trying to learn shit.
The RP YouTube channel started small. Basic lectures, rough workout clips filmed in low-lit gyms and cluttered offices. But slowly, the videos grew tighter, cleaner, more intentionally designed. Mike didn't just show exercises, he broke them open. He explained ideas like minimum effective volume, maximum recoverable volume, and deloading with the exactness of a researcher mapping out a physics problem. And he delivered all of it in his signature tone, soft, calm, and calculated. He wasn't shouting or flexing for the camera like other fitness influencers. He was lecturing, tank top instead of lab coat, dropping information like a professor who traded his whiteboard for a squat rack. For viewers tired of vague gym advice and random trust me bro wisdom, Dr. Mike felt like the scientist who finally cracked the code on muscle growth right in front of them. It looked like the perfect shift, the perfect voice, the perfect lane, or at least that's what everyone believed at the time. By 2020, RP Strength had blown up into one of the most trusted fitness brands online, stacked with mobile apps, diet templates, and coaching packages that promised results backed by real science. The YouTube channel alone shot past 3.8 million subscribers, numbers nobody expected for content that looked more like a college lecture than a hype workout video. Dr. Mike had become the internet's official voice of evidence-based training. The guy who made science feel cool in a world still obsessed with chest day and flexing for the camera. But under all those spreadsheets and polished citations, something else was brewing. The same energy that pushed him as a teenager, that obsession with being the smartest in every room, was slowly twisting into something more dangerous. In chasing credibility, Mike had turned science into a brand, and soon that very title he worshipped would be the thing that crushed everything he built. By late 2019, Dr. Mike was everywhere in the fitness space.
Did the weight training or the training, because you were wrestling before, did it change your win-loss record? Did you become a better wrestler?
So unfortunately, I got less and less invested in wrestling for a few other reasons, sort of outside the scope. But my ability with whatever technique I knew to make the match go my way was like exponentially increased. I mean, if you're just fucking jacked and you're a sophomore wrestler, you just win 50% of your matches automatically. Just because you fucking
raw IQ scale smarter than almost every coach, maybe every coach. And I know more about physiology, body responses, etc. than they do in most cases.
He talked in study references, clean data, and carefully selected citations, but not everybody was buying the act. On December 5th, 2019, another YouTuber, Greg Doucette, walked straight into the middle of Mike's evidence-based kingdom and dropped a digital grenade. His video, titled, "Is Volume Ending Your Gains?" didn't hold back even a little bit. Greg straight up mocked the whole science-heavy lifting movement, calling it a space for lazy lifters who hid behind research papers instead of pushing themselves. Greg wasn't throwing around citations. He was throwing around absolute confidence, and for a whole lot of viewers, that hit way harder than any chart Mike ever posted. It really created two sides in the fitness world. Team Greg had the old school warriors who believed progress came from pushing through real pain. Team Mike had the thinkers who believed in controlled variables, structured training, and strategic recovery. And just like that, the clash between raw grit and polished science was officially lit up. Even though Greg's video didn't call him out by name, Mike still couldn't let it slide. So when someone asked him about Greg's rant during an interview, he gave a little smirk and dismissed it as nothing more than background noise. That moment showed everything. For the first time, Dr. Mike's calm, logical style collided with pure charisma, and charisma hits different. Greg didn't rely on peer-reviewed papers. He relied on confidence and conviction, and that made the clash way bigger than reps or sets. 2 weeks after Greg's viral explosion, the two finally met face-to-face. December 18th, 2019 became the day the internet got its first look at Dr. Mike outside the bubble of his own platform. It was supposed to be a clean, professional debate, intellect versus experience. But what people actually got felt more like a slow-motion lesson in ego. Greg showed up relaxed. He listened, nodded, let Mike talk. And Mike talked a lot. He broke down concepts, recited definitions, and tossed around academic language like he was defending a thesis instead of having a conversation. But under all that confidence, the audience picked up something else, a quiet, cutting attitude. He interrupted, smirked, even yawned while Greg was talking. None of it was subtle. To viewers, it didn't look like a debate. It looked like a professor grading a student he didn't respect. Greg held his ground, kept his cool, asked for clarity, pressed for practical answers, and handled Mike's attitude with a steady smile. Neither one backed down from their stance, but the optics told the story loud and clear. Mike looked annoyed that he even had to explain himself, and Greg walked away, looking like the only grown-up in the room when it wrapped up. The real judgment didn't come from the debate itself.
Keeps getting worse for Mike Israetel. I mean, Mr. Mike.
Beginning of your mesocycle progression before you deload, 4, 5, 6 weeks, you probably start at the lower end of that range. So if you're intermediate, 3, 4, 5 sets, get a little bit sore, get a little bit of a pump, and then add volume to keep getting a little bit sore, keep getting a little bit of a pump. As you add volume, your pump's going to get better. Your soreness is going to probably increase, although not a ton because you're adding volume as you get used to things. Your tension perception sure as hell will increase. And then at some point, you simply won't be able to match your performance anymore when you're doing workouts that are like 10 sets per body part or per muscle group per session. At that point, when you can't match your performance 2 sessions in a row, you deload, wash away the fatigue, and then repeat the progression probably from the lower end going into the higher end.
Gotcha. Okay,
Can I
now
ask a question just about that, just a quick, so basically, Mike, so if I was to do a mesocycle and started, are you suggesting that maybe I should do like a lower amount of, like say me, I'm doing 8 sets. Would I be better off to lower that to say 4 or 5?
How many sets should you do in a workout? Is it a 10, 20, 30, and is it 3 times a week, 2 times a week? What's the minimum effective volume? What is the max intensity? What is RPE?
Stop all the scientific mumbo jumbo. Train harder. This is what I see in the gym. People are lazy, people don't train hard, and so to tell someone to hold back when they're already holding back is moronic and asinine. Tell them, work harder. How hard? Harder than 2 to 3 reps shy of failure is close to failure. Come on, no it's not. 2 to 3 reps shy of failure is a warm-up set for this boy. I don't train like a
Greg is defining is called mathematical volume. It's when you do all the multiplication, sets times reps times weight times distance. And that's a very, very good concept, but I think slightly one that does a little bit more for us in training is talking about the number of hard sets that you're doing, because the number of hard sets, as you do, anything from 5 to 30 reps, roughly close to failure, it's a roughly effective as far as hypertrophy for all the rep ranges within there, because as the weight goes up, the per repetition stimulus for hypertrophy goes up, but also you have fewer repetitions.
Let's see how those methods actually work, in the real world.
Thank you, Greg.
Is he, in fact, the master trainer that you believe? The master dieter? Or is he just the master baiter? Did he just work on a lobster ship like Coach Greg? And is, in fact, the master baiter?
It came from the comment section, and it was brutal. Thousands of people were saying the same thing. Mike looks fed up with Greg the whole time. Mike looks like he aged 10 years in this video. Greg left his ego at the door. Mike didn't. For the first time, Dr. Mike's polished, confident persona didn't look so flawless anymore. The debate didn't destroy him, but it exposed something dangerous. It showed that beneath all the charts and formulas was a man who absolutely hated being challenged. And suddenly, the discussion wasn't just about training philosophies, it was about what fitness actually meant. Greg stood on the belief that progress comes from grinding through real discomfort. Mike believed it was all about optimizing everything through intelligence and structure, and the wild part? Neither one wanted to admit that maybe, just maybe, both sides had their own truth. By mid-2023, 4 years after that debate chipped away at his aura, Dr. Mike was ready for a redemption arc. He didn't present it as a comeback. He framed it like a scientific experiment. The lab coat was coming back out, but this time it looked like posing trunks and stage tan. His new mission was to earn an IFBB Pro card, the ultimate badge in bodybuilding, and finally prove that his science-based approach wasn't just theory, it worked in the real world. The announcement blew up his followers' feeds. Here was the guy who'd spent years breaking down hypertrophy on whiteboards, now stepping under bright lights to test his theories with his own physique. It felt like the moment everyone had been waiting for. Mike truly believed that if his models were legit, he should be able to hit pro-level conditioning without any magic tricks, just perfect programming, tight nutrition, and clean recovery. But to push his body to that extreme, science needed a little backup, and that's when he brought in the chemicals. He openly admitted to using anabolic steroids, talking about them in videos and podcasts like they were part of a careful, research-driven plan. Some fans respected the honesty. Others saw it as straight-up contradiction, because this was the same man who once framed himself as the moral compass of fitness, and now he was using the very shortcuts he once hinted were avoidable with good programming. And soon, those side effects started slipping into his content in a way he couldn't hide anymore. Mike started opening up about crushing anxiety, waves of rage, and long nights where he couldn't sleep at all. For the first time ever, the calm, evidence-based expert sounded like someone losing control of his own experiment. All the variables he loved Training volume, fatigue management, recovery windows meant nothing when the chemistry inside his head stopped listening to the plan. Even as warnings came in from doctors, colleagues, and worried fans, Mike refused to slow down. He said getting that pro card was non-negotiable, like it was destiny. But as the prep went on, the confident, analytical Dr. Mike people once admired started falling apart right in front of the camera. Suddenly, he wasn't the scientist studying others. He was the subject of a case study he never meant to write, stuck in a loop where the researcher and the experiment were the same person. Greg Doucette had built a whole career on shouting into a camera, but when he turned his focus back onto Dr. Mike in 2024, something in his tone shifted. It wasn't just jokes or jabs. There was a hint of real concern buried underneath all the theatrics. Greg started asking the question everyone else was too nervous to say out loud. Was Mike really willing to put his whole life on the line just to step on stage? After months of watching Mike sink deeper into his science-based prep, Greg began dropping reaction videos that walked a tight line between clowning him and trying to warn him. He pointed out all the classic signs of heavy hormone use: the swelling around the jaw, the puffy face, the stiff, almost locked-in expressions that didn't look natural at all. Then Greg dropped the real shocker: the list of substances Mike was allegedly juggling. Insulin stacking, blood pressure flying through the roof, polypharmacy, the term Greg used to describe that dangerous cycle where you take one substance for muscle, another to protect your heart, and another to fix the issues caused by the first two. Before long, you're stuck managing a dozen meds just to stay standing. Greg joked, sure, that was his style. But in between the clowning, he asked the question that hit the whole audience straight in the chest. Why is Mike risking his entire life over a trophy? Then came the breaking point.
So, I wrestled in high school.
Yep.
And then in college, I started powerlifting. So wrestling itself wasn't a super awesome experience for me, even though I got to be sort of decent at it.
Yeah.
But, and then something had to take its place. I definitely wasn't good enough to go to college to wrestle, and I went to college for academics. And by the time I went to college, I was so burnt out on the idea of wrestling. Like, I would literally every year, I would right after wrestling season, I would basically start lifting super hard again because I couldn't lift while wrestling. It was just too much.
Yep.
So I would just be a bunch of different coaches, and they didn't they kind of used exercise as punishment for us.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a lot of wrestling programs.
For some reason, it just didn't. I was an exercise addict in training, so I couldn't understand exercise as bad. Like I remember I had a philosophical realization early in wrestling where I was like, okay, if training makes us better, and we want to get better, wouldn't rewarding us with more training be more intelligent than punishing us with more training?
Yep.
July 2024. After years of prepping, pushing chemicals, and putting himself through mental and physical chaos, Mike finally stepped onto a national bodybuilding stage and didn't even crack the top 5. It could have been a moment of humility, a chance to breathe and rethink everything. But instead, Mike blamed the tanning. He told his followers, "I placed out of the top 5 because of insufficient tanning," as if bad lighting mattered more than years of self-inflicted burnout and body chemistry overload. Greg pounced instantly. The internet laughed again, and this time the jokes didn't stop. But for Mike, none of it felt funny anymore. The embarrassment was out in the open, the story slipping away from his control, the confident scientist now looking like a man drowning in his own narrative. By October 2024, all that pressure, all those years of tension, all the spiraling and denial, finally erupted. Mike popped up in an interview titled "Why Mike Isra Hates Greg Doucette," and from the very first minute, it was obvious this wasn't going to be some calm, measured response. He came in hot. He didn't hold anything back, calling Greg a lying sociopath, saying Greg intentionally made him look stupid, and claiming the 2019 debate was a setup where Greg pretended to be chill, just to expose Mike as arrogant. But what happened next went way past calling out Greg. It turned into Mike putting himself on a pedestal like no one had ever seen before. He started drawing these invisible battle lines between him and the whole fitness industry, bragging about his intellect, his toughness, his superiority, talking like he was operating on a level nobody else could touch. It was the kind of raw, unfiltered ego you only hear from someone absolutely convinced they're a genius. The internet caught on to it instantly. Clips of him bragging about his intelligence started spreading everywhere, stitched right next to footage of him shaking on camera, talking about his anxiety, the rage, the sleepless nights. The contrast hit like a punch. The more he talked about being above everyone else, the smaller he looked on screen. Because underneath all that swagger, all the insults, all the IQ flexing, there was one fragile thread holding everything together: his PhD. That single credential was the foundation of his brand, the source of his authority, the crown he wore everywhere he went, and someone was about to yank that thread loose. In late September 2025, a smaller but respected creator named Solomon Nelson dropped a 2-hour video that shook the entire ground under Mike's career. The title of Solomon's video alone felt like an ending sentence. Mike Isra, PhD, the biggest academic sham in fitness. And unlike the creators who joked about Mike's ego or argued with his training ideas, Solomon went straight for the one thing Mike treated like a crown: his doctorate. He didn't rant, didn't get dramatic, didn't guess. He just read, line by line, table by table, citation by citation. And what he uncovered was nothing short of devastating. Mike's 2013 dissertation, The Interrelationships of Fitness Characteristics in Division I Athletes, was supposed to be a legit study comparing around 80 D1 athletes across 4 sports, measuring things like strength, power output, sprint speed, vertical jump, and all the usual performance markers. On the surface, it sounded sharp, structured, and serious, the kind of research you'd expect from someone building a whole identity around academic authority. But Solomon showed that underneath all that polished scientific language was a document filled with so many basic mistakes that it barely looked like proper undergraduate work. And he didn't cut corners. He walked viewers through every issue step by step. He started with the findings, and honestly, there barely were any. Mike's entire research contribution boiled down to conclusions so painfully obvious they sounded like something from a beginner's textbook. Stronger athletes were more muscular and powerful. More powerful athletes jumped higher and ran faster. Leaner athletes performed better. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing new, just the basics repackaged as research. Then Solomon dug into the data itself, and that's when the real destruction began. In one of the key tables, Mike reported that the lowest performing athletes had a mean body mass of 73.9 kilograms with a standard deviation of 71.8 kilograms. Numbers like that don't even make sense. The spread was so huge it implied some athletes weighed almost nothing while others were impossibly heavy. And it didn't stop there. Solomon found the same copy and paste mistake repeated 3 separate times across different tables. The standard deviation values for one group were copied straight from another, a clear sign that either Mike wasn't checking his own work, or something even more careless was going on.
Mean effective volume is a little tough to estimate formally. Because we have a book, How Much Should I Train? It's about the training landmarks on renaissanceperiodization.com. Gets very technical about how to find your MEV, and really finding a minimum effective volume means analyzing an entire several mesocycles of training where you intentionally train with as little volume as possible and seeing which volume finally results in no growth. So like if you grow 14 sets per week, great. If you take it down to 11 sets per week and you still grow, great. That's definitely 14 was not your minimum effective because you're growing from a lab perfectionist asshole with a PhD. Yeah, hell yeah, that's why I say like that.
Dr. Mike, geez, that's a big deal. And I've noticed that carries a lot of weight. Like all I feel is rage and frustration. It pays to remember that Ronnie didn't grow basically any muscle like this. He grew it doing more conventional things like squats for sets of 8, sets of 10, hack squats, leg presses, often with a very large range of motion, and multiple sets of those kind of moderate reps. That's how you build muscle. That's how Ronnie did it. That's how Grandma did it. That's how Grandpa did it. That's how you're going to do it. This sets of 2 and sets of 4 and the squat and the deadlift that Ronnie's really well known for, you can file this under just for swag. Like this is just living life and being the f***ing man.
Then came the hammer. On one page, Solomon zoomed in to show that Mike had literally pasted the exact same paragraph twice, back to back, right in the middle of his dissertation. Typos, repeated lines, mismatched numbers. All of it captured on screen, side by side. And just like that, the PhD Mike had built his entire empire on started crumbling in front of millions. Then Solomon hit the part nobody expected, the grammar and spelling errors, and there weren't just a few of them, there were hundreds. But the real knockout punch came when he dug into the citations. In one reference, Mike listed an impossible page range, literally showing the article ending before it even started. And he even added a random comma right before the period. And the wild part? That same broken reference showed up 3 different times, untouched, like nobody ever bothered to proofread it. In another moment, Solomon pointed out that Mike cited a book on training periodization to support a claim about psychological variables, something that book didn't even talk about. It was like someone grabbed sources at random and hoped nobody would actually check them. Every few minutes, Solomon would zoom back out and remind viewers exactly what they were looking at. The cornerstone of Mike Isra's entire career, the PhD that built the Dr. Mike brand. And with each section he broke down, the myth of the hyper-precise high IQ scientist started falling apart piece by piece. By the end of the video, there wasn't any confusion left. The man who spent years preaching precision, data integrity, and academic rigor had built a whole empire on numbers that didn't add up and confidence that didn't match the work. And for the first time ever, the proof wasn't just someone's opinion, it was right there on screen, line by line, impossible to dodge. When Solomon finally finished tearing through the dissertation, what appeared wasn't just a case of bad formatting or sloppy writing. It looked like a full collapse of credibility. The conclusions were harsh because they were simple. There was no meaningful contribution made. Mike's dissertation didn't push the field forward, didn't add new insight, didn't break new ground. All it did was restate the most basic truth imaginable. Stronger athletes perform better. A conclusion so obvious it felt like something you'd find scribbled on a locker room wall. And the deeper Solomon went, the more unsettling it became. Plenty of academics chimed in, and surprisingly, many agreed with parts of Solomon's breakdown. Professors in the exercise science world started admitting they'd seen dissertations way worse than Mike's make it through at big universities. Some even confessed that the whole field had gotten lazy. Peer review turning into a rubber stamp process where mediocre work slid by without anyone raising an eyebrow. A few commenters even joked that Mike had been training for failure the whole time. But the bigger question hit harder. Was this just one man's collapse, or proof that the entire science-based fitness movement he helped build was sitting on the same shaky foundation as his thesis? In the days after Solomon Nelson's exposé detonated across the internet, Mike reacted exactly how someone cornered by his own receipts might react. He tried to scrub the evidence. Within hours, the public link to his dissertation on East Tennessee State University's database mysteriously disappeared, suddenly locked behind student and alumni access only, and that was just the warm-up. Then came the excuse. In a live stream clip that spread fast, Mike tried brushing off the whole thing with this almost casual shrug. I guess technically I submitted the wrong draft to the graduate school, oopsie. He said it like he misplaced a homework sheet, not an entire doctoral dissertation. But he delivered it with confidence, like the issue wasn't the content, but the fact that the audience dared to look at it. Soon after, his longtime friend and collaborator, Dr. Milo Wolf, stepped up trying to clean things up. On October 3rd, 2025, Milo dropped a video titled Dr. Mike Responds, the truth about his PhD, framing it like a neutral, level-headed fact check. And with that upload, the damage control era officially began. Milo's video was basically a cleanup mission dressed up as a fact check, and everyone could feel it. He claimed that Solomon had been tearing apart an old draft, not the official version that was supposedly reviewed and approved back in 2013. On screen, he even pulled up what he said was the real final version. Nice and polished, with no typos, no wild data glitches, none of the statistical nonsense that had gone viral in Solomon's breakdown.
And so the PhD isn't some kind of proof of your superiority. It is step one in an academic research career, which most people don't even end up taking. That's my PhD. It's a mediocre step one to giving me a PhD, and not much more than that. Never claimed that it was much more than this. Technically, I submitted the wrong draft to the graduate school. And so that's been, being rectified now. But yeah, my PhD was as Jared Feller likes to say, 100% fine, which is a euphemism for it happened. And it was.
I've taken the Ravens Advanced Progressive Matrices test, and I pegged at scale high. So you get every single question right. And so my IQ is above 160. We don't know how high because they don't do standardized IQ tests above that at scale high. So you get every single question right. And so my IQ is above 160. We don't know how high because they don't do standardized IQ tests above that.
He said this correct draft fixed many of the issues Solomon pointed out, and that somehow, through no one's fault in particular, the messy version was the one that ended up online in the first place. On top of that, Milo hinted that Solomon's whole deep dive was getting a little personal, pointing out out that he'd made over 10 videos about Mike, adding up to more than 13 hours of content. Like the obsession itself was evidence of bias, but the cleanup didn't stop at defending the document. To really push their narrative, both Mike and Milo quietly started downplaying the value of the PhD altogether, the same PhD that used to be Mike's golden badge. Suddenly, the title that once defined his entire brand was being treated like just another line on a resume, and that flip alone had people raising eyebrows. Then the internet did what it always does. It started checking receipts. The first big problem was brutal. The final version Milo claimed Solomon had missed was dated March 2013, while the version Solomon showed was dated August 2013, 5 months later. So if Milo's story was right, that would mean Mike somehow defended and submitted a thesis before the newer version even existed, which made zero sense to anyone watching. And then came what people started calling the smoking one. The public record for the East Tennessee State University repository, the same database where Mike had just locked down access to his dissertation, showed an edit timestamp of October 3rd, 2025, just days after Solomon's exposé blew up, and the real embarrassment hit when someone checked the Google Doc ownership for the final version Milo had linked in his video description. It turned out the document wasn't owned by Mike at all. It was tied to an account linked to a digital marketing agency. Imagine that. The so-called corrected PhD, the one meant to protect the reputation of this academic powerhouse, was literally being handled by a PR firm. By that point, the jokes were everywhere, and the internet had already decided the truth. Cornered, Mike finally admitted what everyone knew. Solomon had the real version the whole time. But instead of owning the situation, he tried flipping it into some harmless technical slip-up. He brushed off the data problems as nothing more than clerical mistakes. Even the people who tried defending him from the beginning started backing away. And for all of Milo's effort to stand by his friend, his own reputation got dragged down with the mess. Meanwhile, Mike? He stepped back from Milo completely. No statement, no explanation, nothing. Just silence. And that silence didn't stop at Milo. Mike never addressed the scandal on his main YouTube channel either. Not in a video, not in a community post, not in a podcast, not even a coded message on social media. He just kept uploading workouts, Q&As, and casual podcasts like the whole internet wasn't dissecting his credibility in real time. And somehow, it worked. His subscriber count didn't drop. It went up. Engagement dipped for a quick moment, then bounced right back. The algorithm doesn't care about integrity. It cares about output, and Mike kept feeding it. Consistency protected his platform, but it crushed his legacy. For a man who built his entire identity around being smarter than everyone else, it was his own arrogance that finally took him down. Make sure you drop a comment, hit that like button, subscribe, share this with someone who needs to see it, and I'll catch you in the next one.